I want to thank everybody and take the opportunity to acknowledge the contribution made by a lot of friends who enthusiastically supported this seminar from different perspectives. Geographically, we have broad representation. Today, we are joined by colleagues from Africa, Central and South America, are constantly supporting bidirectional relationship with us, in particular Spain and Portugal, thanks to Cristina Manzanares for fostering these relationships. Ofedo, Abeno, so Vania and Celeste, is wonderful to see all these friends from Central, South America, North America, EDIA, and thanks to Stephanie Tubert accent, Montreal is foreseen too. And of course, Rick Valakovic as a longtime friend and supporter of ADE. East Asia active participants are, of course, you will see Mike Botello, that is chairing one of the groups, and Allen Ming of the ADEAP and SEADE, facilitating contacts with areas such as Pakistan and Vietnam. Australia is also very well represented. At an association level too, it's wonderful to see colleagues and friends from Student Association, EDSA, IATS, James and Tina are foreseen, and of course, all the stakeholders in other scientific associations and organizations like EADPH, CD, ERO or FDI, all involved in education. I want to thank the continuity of support of past and future presidents of ADE, from Antonio Carrassi, Aiki Murtomoa, Stephanie, of course, and Paul. Like all, for example, with a double hat of organizer of Nordic Deans and Stephanie as leader of the Oral Health Edu project. And of course, Colgate with a competent view on our preference to talk and meet on meaningful topics. Please, as I said before, help us to do it better. I ask the General Secretary of ADE, Barry Quinn, to speak on behalf of ILSE. Please, Barry, take the floor.
Thank you, Corrado. I'd just like to welcome everybody, but also, first of all, give our apologies from our president, Ilse Akota, who presently is busy on clinics, but hopes to join us a little bit later. It's been a pleasure to be appointed the Secretary General for AD, but I also must thank Cristina Manzanares for doing an incredible job, and it'll be very big shoes, Cristina, to fill to be better than you. So thank you very much for all your hard work. I'd just like to remind you all that AD is here to support the work of dental academics, particularly in these challenging times. In spring, I wish to thank you all responding to a survey that we subsequently published in the European Journal of Dental Education. It was COVID-19, the immediate response of the European academic dental institutions and future implications for dental education. This paper, I checked on Scopus, has had 16 citations and a field-weighted index of 65.9, which is incredible for an educational paper. We will now be following up, almost 1 year on, to do another survey to see how the European dental schools have risen to the challenge. So I would encourage you all to please fill this in when you receive it. Later on in spring, through our Erasmus Plus project, Oral Health Edu, there will be another survey, but we would love you all to fill it in later in spring. And this is an important project looking at oral health education and how we can help to integrate it into the wider healthcare context. We are also looking FEHDD at delivering new educational continuing professional development and plan to update you all in the coming weeks about our annual conference. I hope that you have a really enjoyable afternoon and thank you for attending. I now wish to introduce Arena. Arena is representing scientific affairs for Colgate. Colgate has been an amazing sponsor for AD and has sponsored this event for over 10 years. We want to continue this sponsorship and continue both scientific and educational content development. I'd like to pass over to Arena. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barry. And a big hello from my side as well. And I'm very, very happy to welcome you to this session. It's for me to introduce a bit the topic that we will be discussing today, as well as just a few logistic aspects of the session. Let's start with the topic, resilience. I think it's a word that we hear so much lately, and resilience in times of change, in the times that we are all experience nowadays, as being either challenging or maybe even sometimes frightening. But at the same time, we may recognize that there are opportunities to grow. And this is all about what resilience means. So today, we are going to discuss and go a little bit more in depth into the concept of resilience. And we actually have two very interesting perspectives that we will bring to you. One is going to be an academic research presentation, which will share a bit more insight into what is the situation of the mental health of students and why it is probably a very good testimony of looking more in depth into resilience. The other presentation will take us out of the academic world and will actually put us into a more practical perspective. And we will dive in more depth into what exactly resilience means and what are the opportunities, on one hand, to become more resilient individually, and how you as leaders of dental schools can foster resilience, both for the students as well as for your colleagues. So this is going to be what we will discuss in the first hour. Then we will have also the opportunity to exchange and share experiences and hopefully come up with ideas, because there is always interesting to discuss ideas into the group, and there is always strength in coming up with even more interesting ideas once discussions take place. So this will happen in the second hour, where we will break out in smaller groups, and we will have the chance to discuss based on the presentations that we have seen, and also strategize a little bit about how to foster individual resilience, resilience within the dental school, and resilience towards the students. A quick logistic point. As always, if you are not speaking, please mute your microphones. Please leave your cameras. It's always nice to see you, and we love to interact with you. If you want to say something, please open your mics and be free to do it. Also, if you have questions during the presentations, just post them in the chat. We will have a quick Q&A session at the end of each of the two presentations. And we will try to cover as much as we can, but stay reassured that even if we don't manage to answer your questions today in the session, we will follow up afterwards. I think without further ado, I will introduce the speakers of today. The first presentation will be delivered by Dr. Margaret Lafferty. She's coming from the University of Ulster, and she's a research associate in mental health. She has done a very interesting research on students and mental health, and I'm sure you will be very surprised about the results that she will share with us. After her presentation, we will have Terry Strether. Terry is actually a trainer in mental health, and he's running his own consultancy in the UK. His consultancy is specialized in mental health and personal safety. And apart from the fact that he will give us a few interesting tips about how to grow resilience, he's also able to provide a lot of resources that you could access if you're interested in. And hopefully after this presentation, there will be more that you may want to undertake in your school and maybe for your personal resilience development. And you will have the opportunity of doing so by accessing some of those resources. So with this being said, I'm going to let Margaret open up her presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me here today to talk to you just a little bit about the student wellbeing program that we're running at Ulster University. So this study is part of the World Health Organization, World Mental Health International College Student Initiative. And this initiative, because there was a growing concern about student mental health. And the idea behind this is to obtain cross-national information about the prevalence and the correlates of student mental health and suicidal behaviour, such as what are the risk factors and maybe what are the protective factors. This study, or the work that I'm involved with, we started way back in 2015 in what was called the Ulster University Student Wellbeing Study. Now we have a number of papers, they're cited at the end, on student mental health from this study that you might find interesting. The new study that I'm actually working on at the minute is called the Psychological Intervention Trial, otherwise known as the SPIT study. And this is a two-phase project. It was funded by through Interreg, and it's a cross-border study between Ulster University in Northern Ireland and Letterkenny Institute of Technology in the Republic of Ireland. And as I said, this is part of this World Mental Health International College Student Initiative that's led by colleagues in Harvard University. This longitudinal study was launched in September 2019. And it started off, we were trying to recruit 2,000 students for this study. Now, we nearly managed to do that. So in 2019, we recruited 1,984 first-year undergraduate students over the age of 18 in Ulster University and Letterkenny Institute of Technology. Now, I should say that this isn't just dental students. In fact, Ulster University doesn't actually have dental students, so it's a general population of university and college students. The majority, as you will see, were female, and the average age was 21. The instrument that was used was developed by the initiative, and it's on an online, really comprehensive survey that uses what's called World Mental Health CD. And this instrument is designed in such a way that it kind of can predict and diagnose it's a clinical diagnosis of mental health problems. And overall, in that first year, 1,829 students fully completed that survey. So I just want to emphasize that this is students that have just started university. So we're following them up, and we've literally just closed the year 2 follow-up survey, and we have 940 fully completed responses, which we're delighted with. So we will be comparing findings from year 1 and year 2. So what did we find? So in the year 1 study, like nearly 16% of students had a clinical diagnosis, or they screened positively for depression. Nearly 9% had panic disorder, nearly 4% bipolar disorder, and alcohol use and drug abuse or dependence was really high at over 11%. What really concerned us, though, was the findings in relation to suicidal behaviour. We asked them, a range of questions, and 28% of students starting in the university said that they had serious thoughts about killing themselves. Can I just backtrack on something there that I forgot to mention? So within the survey, weights are applied so that it's the findings are then generalizable to the overall population of the university, which is why I'm saying, like 28% screen positively or whatever, that it is generalized to the population under study to gender and age. So again, 14.3% of those students said that they had made a suicide plan. 13.4% had engaged in self-harm. And 7.7% of those students said that they had previously attempted suicide, which I'm sure you will agree is very high and something of great concern. Now, built into our study, we had what we called a high-risk alert. As students triggered this, we were alerted and they were referred to student wellbeing or an accredited counsellor for follow-up help. And overall, 144 student participants triggered that alert. Unfortunately, we don't have the figures yet for the year 2 study in relation to the mental health problems. What I can say to you is that we are expecting that they are obviously going to be high, and that's based on the findings that we've had with in relation to the number of people that have triggered the alert. But 11% actually have triggered the suicide high risk alert this year, and we're really, really concerned about that. What I do have, though, within the survey, we added some extra questions to it in relation to COVID to see how they were coping and what sort of things were stressing them out. So we asked them, like during the, a month when you had stress related to COVID-19, how much stress did various things cause you in different areas of your life? And now this is just a quick snapshot here. Or else we'd be here all day. But you'll see from this that the increased social isolation was a huge factor for them, with 40% saying it caused them very severe or severe stress, and again nearly 30% saying it was moderate. Family finances we'd expected would have been an issue, but I suppose a lot of these students are young enough, it wasn't too big an issue for them as such. We asked them as well about, worries, if they had been worried or how much stress they had about, getting infected or our loved ones being infected. And as you'll see, they were really worried about loved ones getting infected and not so much worried about getting infected themselves, which I suppose is understandable. We also asked them about different things that might have applied to them during lockdown. And you'll see from this that quite a lot said that they were anxious during lockdown, like 44% agreed, 17% strongly agreed. And also that their sleeping patterns were disturbed, like 36% agreed and 26% strongly agreed. We also asked them, in relation to their studies, and their enthusiasm was reduced. Like that was quite a big factor. You can see that quite a lot agreed or disagreed. In relation to being able to conduct their online studies without distractions, it was a bit mixed. We also asked them if they were satisfied about learning from home. And overall, you know, I suppose, again, it was mixed, but, you know, not too bad, I suppose. We also about that in relation to the learning experiences being affected, you know, not affected. You'll see a lot disagreed with that statement. In relation to the support that they received from the university or college, quite a lot felt that, that the support was indeed adequate. And again, in relation to the family situation, it was a bit mixed, but it did indicate that there were some difficulties there, which I'm sure you can imagine. Now, these were taken around September, October time, and I think, you know, with the ongoing lockdowns, unfortunately, things have probably got more difficult as time has gone along. I know from academic staff that, you know, the longevity of this is definitely having an impact on both staff and students. So going back, I suppose we just wanted to bring in the whole thing about, you know, help seeking. We'd asked them, you know, if they had received counselling or if they'd taken medication. Quite a few had, but at the time, now this was in year one, only 5.4% of participants were currently receiving treatment. And if you think back to the number of students that really had, you know, symptoms of mental health problems, this is actually quite low. So we as a university and Letterkenny as well, tried to look at, you know, what can we do to address this issue? And we've been working very, very closely with student wellbeing at Ulster University, just to see what more can be done to help students. So speaking to student wellbeing recently, we wanted to have a wee quick look to see, you know, has things changed for them? And they said most definitely yes. So in relation to, we just took semester one last year, which was August to November, and the student wellbeing services has seen a 14% increase on the same period in 2019-20, which would have been the pre-COVID era. So 14% is really draining on their resources. And you'll see from the graph in yellow, student well-being and student mental health is a huge factor for them. Within the university, they have a hardship fund, and they have seen an increase last semester of 500% with students coming saying that they were really, really struggling and needed some help. This is probably a result of a lot of students not being able to work during the pandemic, etc. A number of initiatives, now this is just a quick snapshot of some of the things that the university are doing to try and address the issues. So there's a counselling service, which is a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week free phone helpline to help students and staff actually. And there's also an online wellbeing platform that we've just signed up for a long license, but hopefully that'll be extended.
It's a meeting. I'm kind of in the middle of sort of.
We also have a Mind Your Mood campaign with a number of different things. We've Mind Your Mood student ambassadors to help students. And like, for example, they have an online coffee check-in frequently hosted by students. We also have Wellbeing Wednesday webinars. Again, a lot of things online just to help, you know, with isolation, managing relationships, etc. Again, online money management and budgeting workshops, mental health support groups. And we also have low intensity cognitive behavioral therapy sessions for students. There's 2 different types, one of which is part of the study that I'm involved with, as I was saying to you. So the SPIT project on the second phase, so phase 1 was all about the survey, and in phase 2, we're trying to test the efficiency of an online CBT-based guided intervention for students with mild to moderate levels of depression or anxiety. And this was developed by our collaborators from VU Amsterdam, again, as part of the World Mental Health Survey Initiative. So the pilot study is just about to finish, and we're hoping to launch the randomized control trial in February 21. So in this, we're going to recruit 100 students, and they'll be randomized to either treatment as usual only, which is the control group, and that'll be the student wellbeing services, or treatment plus this new web-based intervention. So the intervention itself, just very briefly, consists of 7 online sessions, and it consists of text, exercises, audio, visual components, and each session lasts up to about an hour. The big thing about this type of intervention is that there's support from trained guides, which is why we feel that this will actually work a lot better than just your basic online intervention without a guide. And at the end of all of this, we're going to undertake a number of studies. There'll be a qualitative studies where we'll hold focus groups, and we'll hold interviews with both students and with the guides and the staff involved in the intervention to see how they felt about it, and we'll assess the effect through a series of questionnaires. So I think overall, we're really hoping that this is something that might work, and that it will be something else that we can roll out to our students. And look forward, hopefully at some point in the future, being able to update you on progress on that. That's me more or less finished. This is some of the team that's involved with this. This is a collaboration between the School of Psychology and the School of Biomedical Science. Hence the reason it's called the SPIT project, because we actually did collect saliva samples, and our PI Elaine said I should be telling you that we're looking at biomarkers for depression, etc., and looking at microbiome. But as I know very little about this, I'm not going to dwell on that. And this is just some of the publications that we have from the first study, and hopefully we'll have a lot more on the second study going forward. And that is me finished, and I hope you have found that of some help, and just to give some context to it all. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. And of course, this was exactly, as Irina said, the introduction to what we would really like to go on. And as Irina is saying, please feel free to post your questions in the chat or open the microphones, and I will manage the different questions and comments. Of course, Judith behind the curtain is helping me to check if there is any question that is coming on. And of course, I'm just waiting. And I see Mike is already starting. Margaret, can you think how do guides work online in your intervention?
Yeah, okay. So we have trained a number of people. Now, these would be people that have a background, I suppose, in counselling or some sort of clinical experience. So basically what they do is when the students fill out, do the intervention, they respond to them, like they would provide a written response to students, and they're very much there. They're very much there to encourage the student, to keep them engaged with the project. That if the students have any questions, or if they're struggling with any particular aspects of it, that they're there to provide that backup to them.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I have James. Please, I cannot see your face, but I've seen it before. So James is the actual president of the European Dental Student Association. And I see that the microphone is open, but I cannot hear the voice.
Hi, Corrado.
Lovely.
Hi. I'm sorry about the video. Apparently it's been disabled, so I apologize for that. But yeah, as Corrado said, my name's James. I'm the president of the European Dental Students Association. Thank you very much for your really informative presentation, Dr. McCafferty. It was very interesting for us because we've been conducting a survey among students on their experience of mental health during the pandemic, from kind of early on, and a lot of the results that we've had sort of chime exactly with your results. You know, there's significant numbers of students who've been experiencing worsening mental health across a number of metrics, and I think interestingly for us, and probably a good place to raise it here, was that for a lot of students, they felt that more should be done or offered by the universities when it comes to mental health support, whether that be the option of counselling, whether that be you know, opening channels. And I think for us, perhaps the most interesting point was that almost over a third of students didn't know what mental health resources were available to them. And so I think there has to be some real work done at the universities in highlighting what is available, because I think you know, when we speak to academics and dental schools, they quite often, you know, they take this very seriously and they're very keen to make sure that their students have support. But I think quite often students just don't know that that exists. And so I think that would be you know, be a bit of feedback that we would have. And in terms of that, was there any feedback from students in terms of their knowledge of these sort of resources that they have? Because you said that there was a big upsurge around COVID. Was that due to sort of promoting what was available?
Yeah, well, I think now, to be fair, the university is actually really good at promoting, you know, the student wellbeing services. And I know from when we did our first study back in 2015, like the changes within the student wellbeing services since that initial study, and I like to think that maybe some of the results that we had from that initial study, you know, did kind of lead to some changes within the university, in that they realized, you know, that there was such a big problem there. The student wellbeing services, when all our students start, like within that first few days of introductions, they are also like they're introduced to the student wellbeing services. It's very much embedded in, you know, in our portal, the university portal, and you know, they're just encouraged throughout just to avail of the different services that are there. It's not just like mental health, it's around disability, as I say, the hardship fund, etc. But yeah, great work going on with us with the student wellbeing, and I would really encourage, you know, any universities, you know, to try and develop, I suppose, a good service if possible. Letterkenny, our partners, didn't have they didn't have, you know, resources to the same extent as Ulster had, but they've actually just received a grant as well, you know, in light of the current situation, to expand those services. So definitely, like, students are just crying out for help at the minute, as our staff, but you know, I think the more help that people can get, the better. And I think it's very important that student wellbeing is seen as being for staff and for students.
Thank you very much. And I would just point out that if any universities are looking to improve their mental health services, then getting students involved is one of the best things you can do. And obviously we at EDSA will be more than happy to support this in any way that we can if anyone's looking for anything.
Thank you, James. This was exactly what I meant with the fact that we are interacting. Because next question, before Kathleen, because I've seen Kathleen hands up, but I prefer to involve Arctic University, because Mohamed has asked what would be the role of the academics teaching institutions that are in daily contact with the students to elevate the mental health of these students. I think I'm hoping that at the end of this event, we will have some good chance. But Margaret, if you have some hints already?
Well, I suppose, like I'm thinking of our institution again, as I said, the whole link into like a really good student well-being or student support service. And I think just good training for academic staff so that they know exactly, you know, what resources are there, be it within the university or in the wider community, to help students. I mean, we would often have academic staff that would be concerned, and they would go directly to student well-being, or they would encourage the student to engage with student well-being, or quite often they would arrive in the office with them themselves, you know. So I think the key to it is just really knowing what services are out there for students and where people can go for help.
Thank you, Margaret. Kathleen, I've seen your hands up, but I'm not sure that you are connected now.
Yes, I'm absolutely connected. The problem is that for some reason, all the videos were out, not in our hands. So I think the manager who is managing the whole talk. So thank you very much, Margaret. Start my way. Okay, now I'm allowed to talk like that. Thank you. So Margaret, it was amazing. It's a research. You are probably a psychologist, if I'm not mistaken, or psychiatrist.
No, not at all. I have a degree. My primary degree was in psychology, but I'm primarily a researcher. I'm not clinical at all.
So fantastic. So could you just tell us something, kind of take-home message for the leaders, for the head of the schools, that what can we do when we go to the classes? Classes like this, the most of the classes are online. So yeah. Could you give us a tip, an idea? What can we do? Because the research is focusing on a kind of a group of people, okay, what you were focusing on. But if you think about the different countries, different habits and different type of students, so all the teachers, the professors know those students the most. So yes. What could we do on a daily basis to make their lives a little bit easier? Never mind our lives, because we can talk about how the teachers affected by COVID-19. Yes. We are also running research now, and if it's done, I'll be happy to share it with you. How the effect on teachers, not just students. But anyway, what can we do? Have you any idea how could we do that a little bit easier for them and for us this very, very hard time, the pandemic?
A very good question, and I suppose a very hard question to answer in some respects. I think for everybody, I think the big thing, one word that I would say is connected. I think it's very important that people stay connected, be it that the student is staying connected with the class, with the academic. I think the big thing is that if they're struggling, really, really encourage them, and not even saying with their mental health, just struggling in general. I think, you know, get them to reach out, and like if they're finding it difficult to get an assignment in on time, then not to be afraid to say that it's a difficult time for them, because it is for everybody. And what I would also suggest as well, and I know quite a few academics do it, is that at the end of each lecture, they would have a slide with some resources on it. And like there's a big kind of saying here, it's okay not to be okay. That's kind of like a slogan. And we might have some resources like the Samaritans, Lifeline, places that people can go if they're really struggling with their mental health. So maybe just a little slide at the end. You know, it might just be an academic, be it from Hong Kong or Hungary, that, you know, just looks up and says, right, what is available locally if somebody is struggling with their mental health? And they don't have to say anything. It can just be there in the background. I don't know if that's helpful, but
No,
all day talking about it.
But you know, I'm the timekeeper, so
Yes, I know.
will be able to interact with you. This is what we want.
Yes, and I provided my email address at the end if anybody wants to come back to me about it. Do. Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me again.
Thank you, Margaret. And as I have written, please remember that we will keep the questions and we will answer later. I pass the microphone to Irina because she will introduce the next presentation now because we are too late.
We are fine. I think we're fine. I think it's always good to have conversations. And I kind of introduced already what's going to come next, so I'm not going to repeat it. But I think some of the questions will get at least partially additional answers with the presentation from Terry. So Terry, please, the floor is yours.
Give me a thumbs up to let me know that you can see my screen that says building resilience. Oh, that's great news. What about you, Burke? I didn't see your thumb go up. There he is. Got you.
We read also your comments, Terry.
You're going to read my comments for me, are you?
Yes.
Thank you, Corrado. What a wonderfully oiled machine. Brilliant. Ladies and gents, thank you so much for having me. I feel like the outsider in the room. I'm not an academic, although I did go to university and study psychology. I didn't quite finish my studies. My name is Terry. You can probably hear that I talk with a South African accent, although I live and work now in England because I love the weather. It's so warm and tropical here. I've been delighted to be working with Colgate for some time now around spreading the message about mental health within the workplace and what organizations can do to support their people. But also much wider than that, we have been working here in the UK with the Royal College of Nursing, with various higher education establishments such as Loughborough University and the University of Leicester. In fact, members of my training team are, they work at these places, so they understand full well the pressures of higher education. Nobody in dentistry, although I was myself in the dentist chair just yesterday receiving a filling. So it's fresh on my mind. I think this might be slightly different to what you're used to hearing in sessions like this, but I hope that you will take some use from it. There can be no denying that we live in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous era. I think we can all agree with that. Every 20 seconds, the rules seem to change. You know, something different is happening. Now, the reason I'm sharing this particular slide with you is to highlight that this is not the first time that we as a species have been through significant challenges. We've been through stuff before. This phrase, for example, was first coined during the Cold War between America and Russia, where there were people on either side of the pond with their fingers hovering over a big red button, which would launch the world into World War III. And what they found was the key factor that prevented the buttons being pressed was resilience. The key here that I want you to understand is that stressed brains make bad decisions. And it's for that reason that I want to explore what we can do in this short session. It's only a 20-minute session. I'm going to try and give you as much of the evidence-based approach to looking after your well-being without quoting too much. I mentioned we've been through pandemics before, and we have. We've been through things like HIV/AIDS, SARS, Ebola, the herpes virus even, to an extent. And what we find in the wake of all of these pandemics, the research tells us, is a drop in productivity and engagement. We find an increase in absenteeism and presenteeism. Now, presenteeism might be a phrase that we're not all familiar with. So we all know what absenteeism is. That's when we're not there. What then do you think might presenteeism refer to? I'd welcome your thoughts if anybody wants to open their mic or pop it in the chat function. What do you think presenteeism is?
present but not functioning, not switched on.
Absolutely, yeah. You're there in body, but you're not in mind. You're not in spirit. I wonder if anybody's ever felt like that. I wouldn't ask you to identify yourselves. Mentally absent, Michael. Thank you. Yeah, Barry, working long days. Yeah, for sure. But you're there in body, but not in mind. The lights are on, but nobody's home. I wonder if you've perhaps seen that in some of your students, or maybe even your partner at home, or whatever it is. I don't know. But we know that there's an increase in those things. I think the icon kind of helps us with that definition. I wonder if any of us have felt this way in the past. Zoom syndrome. Don't get me started on Zoom, Michael. Goodness me, I've lived my life on it now. Stress, anxiety, and depression. Also, we see an increase in the wake of pandemics. Okay, so we know this is coming if it's not here already. And I was really, I was shocked, but unfortunately not surprised by the statistics that Margaret has just shared with us. Really powerful stuff. And we know that there has been a problem certainly amongst students within higher education for some time now. And periodically we get these shocking updates of suicides taking place within educational establishments. And I know recently one of the organizations that I work with has experienced just such an occurrence in their halls of residence. So it is something that's going on right now. And the COVID pandemic has been largely implicated in that person deciding to end their life. We know this is going to go up. What I was also interested in, I don't know if many of you picked up on this, but the people who agreed to take part in Margaret's survey, the breakdown between male and female, I wrote them down quickly. 72% female, 28% male. Now, what struck me about that is that if we look at the global picture in relation to suicides globally, those numbers reminded me of the suicide picture, because we know that 3/4, 75% of all suicide globally is men. Now, does that mean that women and men experience mental illness in different ways? Well, yes, there is some evidence to suggest that, but it doesn't mean that one gender is weaker or stronger than the other. What it suggests is that maybe we're experiencing similar problems, but we're choosing to seek help or reassurance or a release in different ways. Because if we have a look at a different set of statistics, and we have a look at statistics that relate to addiction, alcohol dependency, drug dependency, gambling, all of those things, we notice that the numbers are almost completely reversed. We notice by far and away 3/4 of men, those statistics, 3/4 will be men, and the remaining quarter will be female. So it says to me in the data, one way of interpreting that is that maybe women are just better at asking for help. Maybe they're better in terms of talking about the softer emotional side of things, and men rely on classic traits of masculinity, which is we man up and we tough things out. Now, what's super interesting is the relationship between suicide and the field of dentistry. It's long been said that dentists are amongst the highest. It's interesting because I've had a look at the data behind that, and it doesn't appear that there's any significant variance. What we do know, however, is that burnout, because of workload and workaholism and a wide variety of factors within the field of dentistry, is a very high risk. And we know that burnout and depression can also be most often linked with suicidal thoughts and action. So that, I think, is more the line that we should be going down, rather than, yes, if you're a dentist, you'll probably want to take your life at some point. I don't think the data quite says that to us. Okay, great stuff. Let's move this through. What I wanted to do was just have a think about all of the pressures that I'm hearing about from the world of higher education. So people who are lecturers, people who work in, for example, in those places that I've mentioned earlier on, they're telling me that they're worried about these things right now. And whilst I think it's admirable that we've got this focus on student mental health and well-being, often the academics and the lecturers are the ones who are left behind and forgotten. And I was really pleased to hear Margaret saying that it should be both student and staff based. I think that's really the way that we need to go in terms of a joined up holistic approach to mental health and well-being. We're hearing that people are concerned about pressure, not only within work, but also presumably you have families and private lives. How are they working together right now? How do I maintain standards as a lecturer, as a professional? How do I maintain standards in this era where I can only see my students via Zoom, or I'm delivering things that used to be face-to-face, but now they're in this very different environment? Lecturers are telling me that they're worried about, they're expected to be masters of technology, masters of delivering virtually now. And I'm supposed to know how to edit a blog. I'm supposed to know how to edit a voice audio podcast. I'm supposed to know how to get videos out in quick time. And we just kind of assume that people have these skills, and maybe we don't. Maybe we don't. Changes, of course. And for me, one of the biggest issues is this inability to switch off. When do I switch off? Because now I'm delivering perhaps from home or perhaps from my place of work via this computer. This computer lives in my study at home, or it lives in the spare room, or it lives somewhere. And, right outside that door is my family life. And we know that workaholism, constantly being workaholics has been a problem, not only for dentists, but also for people in higher education. So it's a bit of a perfect storm, it seems. I found this in the research, which I thought was really interesting, to bring it specifically to the world of dentistry. It's from a paper in 2005. Traits such as perfectionism, unrealistically high expectations, and an aversion to failure. Another research paper goes on and suggests the type of person who is attracted to dentistry may be at more risk of developing a mental health issue because of those traits, as previously suggested. So I wondered, with that in mind, let's see if we can find some positive in all of the doom and gloom that's out there right now. Have you learned anything new about yourself during this pandemic? I'd be really grateful if you could pop something in the chat. Something surprised you about yourself? I can see Alina smiling there. So I wonder, what have you learned about yourself during this pandemic? And only share if you feel comfortable and able to share, please. Hang on to it if not. But tell me in the chat function, or if you're brave enough, open up a microphone. Let's hear what you've learned.
I can start here.
Please go for it, Mohammed.
I have found myself to be able to catch up very fast with the new normal.
Really, that's a very interesting sign of a resilient approach to work. Reintegrating to a new reality, I suppose, Mohammed. Thank you very much for that. Any other thoughts? Julia needs structure. Interesting, yes. Patterns. The brain takes reassurance from patterns. It's predictable. In anything that is a lack of routine or a disruption to my daily pattern, the brain perceives it as a threat, as a possible attack. So I can understand that. Anything else coming in on the chat, Corrado? Could you help me?
Yes, of course. Nicola is saying, I don't mind my own company. Ability to catch up very fast with new normal, as Mohamed has already said.
Yes.
Or
yes.
suggesting solution-oriented.
Solution-oriented, yeah. Julia needs structure. Anything else? Has anybody learned anything about themselves during this period?
I think the main point is the resilience.
Resilience. Yeah. You feel you are resilient, or you lack resilience?
Not like. So about this presentation, it's very sensitive, really. And also I want to mention that also the academic staff is under big pressure, not only the students. Students are always explaining, doctor, you can't imagine COVID, etc. But COVID, we have also this environment. So also the teachers, we are under for me, in my example, this is the stress.
Absolutely. And that's what I hope I shared with you on the previous slide. I got a lot of those things from speaking to a friend of mine who is a lecturer, and he teaches within a university. And he was saying, I'm worried about my safety. I'm worried about bringing this illness home to my family. I'm worrying about the effectiveness of my lessons. I'm having to handhold students who are worried about their future. And I'm having to manage the students' concerns, because a regular phrase he said he hears a lot is the students would say, I didn't sign up for this. This is not what I signed up. This is not part of the student experience. And he, as the lecturer, is having to manage that. And he's going, well, yeah, neither did I. Neither did I. None of us did.
We must not compare two situations, because everyone understands it's with their own experience and own personal life. But always I'm always jealous that they are students, they have just to study, and I'm thinking, for example, about my family, my kids, my job, and I'm thinking that I have lots of things to think and be stressed than the students. Maybe it's my fault, but to be honest, I'm thinking like I thought like this during this pandemic situation. So we are also under the stress, not only the students, but we have more responsibility to control our stress because we are more older generation.
Well, yeah, absolutely. You're the ones who are supposed to hold it all together, aren't you? You're the ones who are supposed to present an air of confidence and reassurance to your students. And you know what? It's very difficult to do when you don't have the answers yourself.
There must be examples for them. That's why.
Absolutely. I might come back to that theme about being the example, because I think that's a very true statement. We need to be the example. Wow, there's so much stuff coming in on the chat as well. This is great. Online teaching is okay, says Michael, when it needs must, but we need and crave social contact. And you're quite right. The human brain, we are designed to be with other human beings. The human animal is a pack animal. You know, we get our strength and comfort from being with others. That's when we're at our most creative. And as a result, when we're not with others, our brains can actually punish us by making us feel bad, so that it drives us back to the safety of the herd. This is a basic understanding of how the brain works. But I love all of this. This is fantastic stuff. And all your chat is being captured. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. I wanted to share this with you because we're all, I've heard this phrase a lot of recent days. We're all in the same boat. We're not though, are we? We're not. We're all in very different circumstances. We're all experiencing COVID, and perhaps that cliche that we're all in the same boat might be true for some, but I think perhaps a more accurate interpretation is we're all in the same storm, but we're in different boats. Maybe that's another way of looking at it, I wonder. So I've taken this from the world of bereavement counseling, which I think is particularly relevant right now because bereavement counseling is concerned with trauma and how the human brain responds to trauma. And you may recognize this as if you're involved in change management programs as a change curve. And I wanted to share this with you here. This is generally speaking what we know about how the brain responds to change. Okay, and it's directly linked to my idea of resilience. I was very interested, Mohammed, you found that you are more able to integrate to the new world, the new reality. That would suggest to me that you are over to the right of this particular graph, as if I hope that makes sense on your screen. In other words, you're able to deliberate and realize that I can't control what's happening around me right now. The thing I can control is how I choose to respond. And so I choose to respond in this way. And so you're able to integrate that new world. That doesn't mean to say that some days you don't wake up and wish for the days that have gone and, you know, being able to see and going out whenever you wanted and doing all of those things, or going down to a football match or whatever the case may be. And it doesn't mean that we don't feel anger about that. But you can split this graph roughly in two. If you think over to the right would tend to be people who show more resilience. People who have more resilient tendencies tend to get to that phase a bit quicker than people who are always looking backwards. In other words, over to the left, I'm remembering what I've lost. I'm fighting to regain what I've lost. And we know that's not helpful for the human brain. And as I look at this graph, I'm reminded of recent behavior of certain world leaders from across the pond, shall we say. And I don't want to offend anyone on the call, I certainly don't, but certainly this denial about, you know, election results and, you know, the existence of COVID and all that kind of stuff certainly rang a bell in my head. And, you know, it's a perfectly natural response. What I would urge you to think of is, how do we get ourselves moving over to the right of this chart quicker? And that's what I'm here to share with you. So I wanted to do a quick check, and I'd like you to keep this to yourself. Please don't share this. Don't share your results in any of the chat function or anything like that. It's a personal reflective exercise. Let's do a check-in with you. Aline, I think you're absolutely right. We need to focus on the teachers, the lecturers, and that's what I'm here to do today. So over the past 2 weeks to a month, let's use that as a time frame, have you felt more keyed up or on edge? And when I say keyed up, I mean more as though you've got this feeling that you're on thin ice and at any point the ice may break. If you have, give yourself one point. If you haven't, you get no points. So every time you answer yes, you get 1 point, and we're going to simply add them together. Have you been worrying more than usual over the past 2 weeks to a month? If you have, 1 mark. Have you been more irritable or snappy? Catalin found that amusing. We've struck a chord there, Catalin, I think. Have you had difficulty in relaxing or switching off? Have you been sleeping poorly? Remember, if you answer yes to any of these, give yourself 1 mark. Have you had more headaches or neck aches than normal?
I hope we must not share the results, yes?
Don't share the results, keep them to yourself. Have you had any of the, especially with this one, have you had any of the following? Please, if you've had any of them, only 1 mark. Even if you've had all of them, 1 mark. Have you been worrying about your health? Have you been finding yourself on Google, trying to diagnose what's wrong with you? It happens to all of us. And have you had difficulty in actually falling asleep? If you have, 1 mark. Right, here's what I'd like you to do. Add all the ones. How many you get as a total? I don't want to know the answer. Don't share it in the chat. A normal, and I'm going to use air quotes, healthy score is around 4 or 5. Yeah. This is something called the Goldberg Anxiety Scale. It is what general practitioners might use if you went to the doctor and said, doctor, I'm feeling a little bit stressed or anxious. They might do something like this. There are many other tests, but this is one, and it's just a way of engaging you. So the higher you score, the more of an indicator it is that stress might be a bigger part of your life. Other ways you might notice or recognize stress, particularly in this online world, is maybe you notice your students or colleagues or peers have these things. All of these things coming up on the screen right now. And the point that I'm trying to get at here is that we need to get rid of the idea that mental illness is just all in your head. What goes on in our minds manifests physically. So there can be physical symptoms. For me, when I'm stressed, I get a lump in my throat. It's just here. I can tell you exactly where it is. There is nothing there. I've had cameras up my nose and all sorts of things to try and establish if there is anything. There is physically nothing there, but it's a stress response that I struggle with. And I try and swallow and it feels like I'm swallowing over a stone. And I know that about myself now. So do you know what your triggers are? Do you know what your signs are? That's probably the first step to good resilience. I want to share with you very, very briefly that the key to all of this is change. If you notice change in someone's behavior, that might be an indicator that something's not quite right. Something has upset the homeostasis, and your body will always try and find that. Okay, very, very quickly, hold your hand out for me like this. I want you to have a look at the palm of your hand. Come on, I can see some of you on the screen. Hold your hand out. There we go. I'm going to give you a quick neurobiology lesson as to how the brain is functioning. Very early in the human development, this part of the brain develops first. This is referred to as the reptilian center. It's automatic. It happens, to look after all the various functions of my body core temperature, the functioning of my kidneys, and all of those things are being taken care of by this part of my brain, which I can't actively control. I can't say, kidney, do more of what you do. No matter how hard I try, it's not going to work. And having had the kidney stones a couple of years ago, I know what happens when it goes wrong. But anyway, later in our development comes this bit. Let me fold the finger over like so. Fold that finger over into your palm. Okay, this represents our limbic system, our emotional brain. And in his work, The Chimp Paradox, Stephen Peters calls this the chimp brain. It's automatic and it's irrational. This is also where my fight-flight center lives. The fight-flight center, of course, responsible for keeping me safe. It detects and constantly scans for threats and opportunities in my environment. Much later in my development comes this bit here, which is the cortex, which sits over the top. And roll your fingers over the top like so. Roll your fingers over the top. Good stuff. This is a rubbish fist, by the way. If you're into combat sports, don't make a fist like this because you'll break your thumb. It's not very good. But as a representation of the brain, it works okay. So this is my logical, rational brain, where you good folk who are academics and understand models and theories and all that kind of stuff, this is where we live. This is where we think our decisions are made. Now, it doesn't matter how many degrees or PhDs you've got. At times of stress, what can often happen is we flip our lid. And as a result, the part of the brain that's running the show is the automatic emotional brain. Okay, now I think that's really important. I'm going to mix up my animal analogies here, and I'm going to say this part of the brain, the green and the orange part of my screen, is the horse, and this part of the brain is the jockey. The jockey's job is to keep the horse on track, but at times of stress, the horse can sometimes throw the jockey. And so as a result, everything we see is dangerous. Everything we see is threatening. I don't know if any of you have pets. My daughter, who's 10, has guinea pigs. We've had these guinea pigs for about 4 years, but every time I go in to feed these blooming things, they run like I'm a wolf about to eat them. Even though I'm the guy that feeds them every day, they still leg it. Why? Because their amygdala is telling them, danger, danger, danger. And that's a bit like we are now. For a lot of people, we're in that phase of being, So what I want to share with you briefly is how do we put the horse back, how do we put the jockey back in the saddle to say, calm down, that's the guy that feeds you. You know, that's the guy that feeds you. Or if it's a smoke alarm, stop sounding smoke alarm. It's not a catastrophic house fire. It's just the toaster. Yeah, so that's what we're talking about here. So how do we do that? Well, firstly, I think we need to understand what resilience is. Resilience is not grinning and bearing it. Resilience is not, I've run into a brick wall, I fall over, I go, ow, that hurt, and I get up and I run again. My background, I was a police officer for 20 years. So dealing with resilience was a huge part of my day-to-day life. Seeing trauma, death, conflict, fights was an everyday part of my world. And I managed a team of people who were also going out and dealing with that. I was a sergeant, which is the first level of management within the police hierarchical structure. And so when my officers were going out, my job as the manager was making sure that they'd done the right paperwork, but then also sending them out to the next job. Resilience became key. And it's not just about getting back on the horse and going out again. Resilience is about being enhanced by trauma. And the research is fascinating right now because the first time we're talking about this concept of post-traumatic growth. In other words, not all trauma causes me damage or harm. Some trauma can actually make me stronger. I want to share with you a couple of ideas that might give us a clue about how we do that as I bring this to a close. Charles Darwin is so often misquoted. People think he said survival of the fittest. He didn't. He said the survival of the most adaptable to change. And so how adaptable are we being right now, and what can we do to improve our adaptability? Well, first things first, if we think about stress as being this bucket, my ability to contain stress, I've got a constant source of stress coming in the top. One way is to stick a tap on the bottom, isn't it? Another way is to grow my bucket. People think that these are good things to help them through times of stress. Believe it or not, you do not have an inherent level of alcohol that you need to maintain at all times. That is a complete myth. Alcohol is a poison. It is not good for your mental health. It may make you feel better in the short term, but in the long term, it will cause more harm than good. So think about alcohol if that is your go-to source of getting away from stress. Gardening, of course, gardening is not good for us. And I do, of course, gardening is very good for you. I'm talking about drugs here. Drugs of all kind, whether they be prescribed or otherwise, if that's your go-to source, bear in mind that that can be damaging. Addictive behavior like gambling, again, we know, short-lived results. Busy people sacrifice sleep. Stop it. Sleep. You need it. The research is fascinating. If you're interested in it, I recommend a book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, a proper neuroscientist who studies sleep and the importance to our brains. You will be more efficient, you'll be more effective, you'll reduce your risk of heart disease. The benefits are endless. Please make sure you're getting the right amount of sleep for you. And I'm going to come for your coffee as well. Caffeine is a central nervous stimulant. It mimics the effects of anxiety. So my challenge for you is think about how many cups of coffee you're putting in your body. If your first thought in the morning is, I need a cup of coffee to get me through the day, you're sleep deprived, not caffeine deficient. All the evidence is very clear. So please do think about that. Or maybe you're the anomaly. Maybe you're the exception to the rule where you can drink a double shot espresso at 11:30 in the evening and sleep like a baby. Let me reassure you, you are an exception in medical science, not the norm. Okay, what can we do to build resilience? In a nutshell, we need to find ways of creating autonomy, give people some form of control, because when we don't have control, that's when we get problems. So things may have changed in your world, but what aspects can you control? And bring that back into line. How can you get better at things? People need an idea of mastery. Will I be the best at this? So we all have that internal desire to be the best we can be. And most importantly for me, think about your purpose. What is your purpose telling you? You know, why are you on this planet? If I could give you an exercise very briefly to think about this, what's your one sentence? How would you summarize your life purpose in one sentence? When we leave this earth one day, there'll be a plaque or commemorative stone somewhere. What will it say on the stone? It won't say, here lies the dean of such and such, or this person did a very, very good project and delivered it on time and under budget. It won't say any of those things. You know, hopefully not anyway. There's a guy who famously is in one of the cemeteries in London, and on his stone, his memorial simply has 3 words. It simply says, husband, father, communist. Here's a man who was super clear on what his purpose in the world was and wasn't shy about it. So what's your 3 words or your 1 sentence? Have a think about that. And finally, as I bring this to a close, I would encourage you to think of 3 good things that have happened to you today. 3 good things that have happened to you today. Can I ask you to think about that? I'd love it if you'd share them in the chat. You see, we get what we look for. The research is very clear. It all points to the fact that if you're looking for danger and risk and threat, you'll find it. And as a result, your brain starts to think that this is the accurate ratio of negative and positive in the world. And that's not true. We're doing ourselves a disservice. So switch your scanner. Start your scanner looking for positivity. And believe it or not, it will make a significant difference to your life just by doing it. So can I ask you to share in the chat function 3 things that you are grateful for today? Cooking dinner for my sons, Michael. I love that. Sandra, celebrate 80 years of my mom. Isn't that wonderful? Got a visit to my GP, Mohammed. Yeah, nice. Nice. Okay, come on, let's have some more. Let's have some more. You see, all the evidence tells us, and the research into what we can do with our brains is amazing. We're now learning that we can actually direct our brains to find these positive things, and it can become a habit. And so I think, John, that's very kind, President. Thank you very much. So please do get out there, practice this. I do this as part of my evening routine when I'm going to bed. I sit down in my journal and I write down in my journal 3 things that I'm grateful for in that day. And you know what? It becomes interesting because you get fed up of writing the same thing. So the next day you start to look for things to be happy about. Isn't that a change from where we normally are following 24-hour negative news? You know, keeping up with social media, which is bombarding us with negative messaging. Start your brain looking for positive things and it will find it. Ladies and gents, I'm really looking forward to opening up this conversation and thinking about what we can do to bring some of these ideas into your workplace. So, you know, you can't help anyone unless you've sorted yourself out first. I would urge you to think about that. I have just one more that I'd like to share with you very, very quickly. I think this is a very relevant and pertinent slide. If I can just call this up on the screen. Here we go. Have a look at this. I hope you can all see that. Let it sink in. So whilst we're about to discuss all the things that we can do to make the difference where we work, you can't change anyone if you damaged yourself. Thank you so much for your time. I'd welcome any questions.
Very well done, Terry.
Thank you, Corrado.
And again, I think that Terry has already asked for many, not questions, but good suggestions in the question and chat. So I think that Terry can already see what is happening in the chat, some very good suggestions. Of course, the homemade cake might be some good aspects, but we are really spreading from different geographical areas and different experiences. So I would really like to let people think about Terry's suggestions, and I don't see any question just right now. If I'm supposed, yes, here we are. Again, Terry, Mike is already starting with the how raise this issue with management and policymakers. So,
sorry, Corrado, I thought you were going to carry on saying, yeah, how do we raise this issue with management and policymakers? I would be amazed if those management and policymakers aren't already aware that this is an issue. Certainly here in the UK, there has been for many years conversations about mental health, mental well-being, resilience. It's everywhere, you know, celebrities, sports stars, royal family members, they're all talking about it. So it would be a bit odd if you weren't talking about this where you work. And, you know, the young people that you're helping and training to become the dentists of the future, they're aware of it too. They're all over it, you know. So I think it would be a void to come into an organization where resilience isn't spoken about. And I know James would certainly have a strong view on that. But yeah, very interesting. I think in direct answer to the question, just start talking about it. Have a conversation. Don't be scared and don't try and bring in, you know, loads and loads of policies or the finished product right now. Just start the conversation and you'll find that we're all human beings.
And I think, Terry, you can read James' answer. It's wonderful because this is exactly from an emotional point of view how it started. Thank you, James, really.
James, that is a great example, you know, and certainly even outside the world of, you know, academia and in the world of business, which is where I do the vast majority of my work, when you get people at the very top of an organization who are able to share their own personal story, that's powerful. And that becomes contagious. And it almost gives permission for others to be more real and show their vulnerability. It's a truly powerful thing. It really is, you know. So, and none of us go through life in perfect mental health all of the time. It's just not the way mental health works. It really isn't. And as part, I only had, you know, a very short time with you here today, but as part of the discussion is to consider what is mental health? What does it mean? When most of us say mental health, what we mean is mental illness. We talk about all the diagnoses and the labels, but that's only a part of what mental health is. And just the same as your physical health, you know, we all have physical health. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good. Thank you, James. That's a great question. I saw another question from Mohammed about, is it transferable?
Yes, that's it. Thank you, Terry.
Yeah, is it transferable? It's really interesting. It becomes contagious, if that's what you mean. And I'm not sure contagious is the right word to use right now, particularly in the midst of a pandemic. But it can become contagious because when you're around people, you must have experienced this. When you're around people who seem to suck the joy and life out of any party or any situation, you can start to feel that way too. But when you're around people who are happy and upbeat and try and look for the positive, you start to do that as well. So it's really interesting. Well-established principles in the world of coaching and, you know, self-development and self-improvement are around choose carefully who you spend your time with. Do they bring energy to your life or do they suck energy from it? Because of that very point. I hope that answers your question. Is it transferable in the sense of can you build resilience? Absolutely. Resilience is not a fixed character trait. The evidence is very clear. There are things that we can do to build our own personal resilience. And a lot of that is based around understanding how the brain works, cognitive behavioral therapy type approaches, where we reprogram our knee-jerk reaction to situations, you know, which is most of the time we're reacting. I'm sorry to break it to you. Most of the time we are reacting rather than responding. And there's a big difference there.
Mohamed, sorry, I stopped you before. So if you want to speak up with the microphone, if this answer is correct for you.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Okay, thank you. And back, Terry, I think I still have some minutes. Nicola is asking, are there any good tools to measure resilience in individuals or groups? So tools to measure.
Tools to measure is a very interesting one. Perhaps Margaret might be able to come in on that one. I'm not aware of specific tools because they are so subjective, aren't they? They fluctuate from day to day. If you ask me a set of questions now, the answers that I give you to those questions next week might be very different, you know, and I suppose that is in and of itself an indicator of resilience. A lot of them are quite subjective in terms of how I feel. Margaret, do you know of any?
Sorry, I have to admit, I'm sitting responding to somebody on the chat. Michael, sorry, I shouldn't be. Sorry, can you just, what was the question?
The question is in relation to tools for measuring resilience.
Yeah, like there's a few. I know I've used one. The problem with a lot of resilience tools is actually you have to pay for quite a few of them. Let me think. I know I used one recently that was quite short. I'll have a quick look for it and put it up on the chat.
Thanks, Margaret.
Yeah. I think it was the brief resilience scale or something like that. I'm not sure exactly who used it though.
Mm-hmm. It would be something similar, I would imagine, to the Goldberg scale, or, you know, how do you feel about this? Do you agree, strongly disagree? That kind of stuff, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think that's what it's actually called, the brief resilience scale, if you look that up.
Brilliant. Any others?
Not really. Yes, there is one. Sorry. No, Nicola was just saying thanks for the answer. So
yeah. Oh, Nicola says, yeah, I'd be looking to measure change in an organization. Well, yes, in terms of resilience specifically, maybe not so much, but certainly in terms of how do you measure well-being within an organization, there's a wide suite of things that you could use there, and I can share some links with you that might help you out. There are all sorts of complicated HR type equations which depend on the number of population and workforce and all that kind of stuff, but I'll be happy to share those in the resources after this.
Okay, so I think that I have completed my task. Irina, it's up to you to drive us into the different rooms, or how do you
Yes, so I think I maybe just in a minute explain what we will do now, because we thought that you may want to also have some discussions around yourselves, and because this is still quite a generous group, then we will just break into smaller groups and offer the opportunity that you exchange ideas, hopefully with some inspiration from the two presentations. And we have prepared a couple of questions to work on. So each group will have one specific question to answer. It's all about resilience, but fostered in different environments and in different instances. And I think it would be great if at the end of, I would say, 25 minutes, we would come back into the plenum. We will not share what you have discussed, but we have some great leaders of the groups who will take care of consolidating some of the outcome of your conversations, which will become a follow-up document. So we will share that with you once the session is done, and you will actually have the opportunity to see also what the other groups have discussed and have thought about. And I would hope, together with everybody that contributed to the session today, that those will be a few ideas that you can take back and start more thinking and more work around resilience, either for yourself or within your schools, families, organizations, groups of friends. I think, to Terry's and Margaret's point, it's all about acknowledging and discussing about it and making people feel comfortable about having those conversations. So let's start with the breakout sessions now.
No,
I will.
One moment, Irina, please. Yeah? We have to remember that the breakout rooms are not recorded. So feel free to say
Absolutely
whatever you want, because it will be summarized by one of us taking the notes, but it's not recorded. This is important, we think, because of course we are fully aware of the language that might be too fast or too difficult for some of our friends, but typing during the plenary was easy. In the groups, it's better if we speak up. So it is not recorded. We are 36, and I think we are back in the right way. And I would like to leave to Irina the way forward to share the documents all together.
Yes, so I think what we were saying was that we would also give the word to Margaret and to Terry, to just who kind of jumped from one room to another, to let us know if there were a few things that they would just like to share with the broader group from what they've heard. And then I think before they will do that, I will probably say goodbye already myself, and thank everyone for the active participation and for staying so long with us. I think this is always highly appreciated. I also hope that you get a lot from these sessions, and we are always open to your feedback, and the themes we always choose based on your preferences and your suggestions. So keep sending those, keep telling us about what you would like to discuss and what is important to you as a leader of a dental school. Because we have a lot of flexibility, and we can discuss topics and expand on them as you feel those are needed. So I think without further ado, have a lovely evening, and I would let maybe start with Margaret first to let us know, and then pass on to Terry. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So yeah, I was skipping briefly through all of the sessions, and I suppose a few things that came, like stood out, a few words stood out, like contact and connect and talk to people and exercise. And it actually reminded me of a campaign that's going on here at the minute. It's called the Take 5 Steps to Wellbeing. And I'll actually share the link to that with yourselves. So the 5 steps that they talk about is connect. So connect with people around you. Building those connections will support and enrich you every day. Be active, go for a walk, run, cycle, play a game, garden or dance. Exercising makes you feel good. Take notice, stop, pause, or take a moment to look around you. The 4th one is keep learning. Don't be afraid to try something new. Rediscover an old hobby or sign up for a course. And the 5th one is give. Do something nice for a friend or even for a stranger. Thank someone, smile, or volunteer your time. I say that was just something that stood out for me, and I had been reading about that earlier today, and I just felt that it was, you know, something as a takeaway message. So yeah, I'll share that link with you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Margaret. Thank you so much. And it's so interesting to see that some of those themes came up also in the breakout groups.
Yeah.
In all of them, I assume. So yeah, I think we may already have some good tips in our pocket to start building resilience with us and with the ones around us. Terry.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm sharing a screen with you very briefly just to summarize some of the things that I think might be useful to you moving forward. What Margaret was talking about is called the 5 Ways to Wellbeing. It's an international research project. The New Economics Foundation did it some time ago, and it's included in all of our programs because it's common sense. The trouble is, it's not common practice. So it's a classic case of this business going on. You know, we know we should do it, but we don't. I thought I'd just share this with you as an idea. I think you need to align staff and student mental health programs. Make sure they're on the same page, that we know that both staff and students are included. That could even go down to your curriculum and your pedagogy and how you actually deliver things. You know, is it appropriate to mental well-being? Is that at the core of what you're doing? Create mentally healthy workplaces for your teams, for your staff members, for your teachers and lecturers. Give clear leadership and guidance. I know that people who work within the field are very often pulled in many, many different directions. We can't do everything all the time. So as leaders, make sure that you're leading and people know what you want them to do. Make mental well-being and mental health in your school a strategic priority so that somebody at the top owns it and it gets reported on. And finally, make sure you know that everybody knows how to access support, whether that be internally in the school or externally. Bear in mind that sometimes people may be reluctant to access support that's inside the school because they feel it might in some way impact on their career. or their learning process down the line. So maybe external support might be more appropriate. Don't feel that you have to own everything. All of these things are contained within the link that I've just shared in the chat function. Thanks ever so much for engaging, and I look forward to maybe linking up with you on LinkedIn or something like that. But take care of yourselves, and I wanted to leave you with a positive message. We've all got the hard wiring to get through this really challenging time. We just need to remember how. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. The idea is really that we can go on. So we are not stopping the conversation to go on, but we wanted just to officially end everything within the 2 hours, because we think this is the right time for this. Of course, if you want to contact Terry, please do so on LinkedIn, or the office in Dublin will be a good contact point for any question that might not be solved immediately after the meeting. My main interest really here is to thank Miguel Braga, Dennis, Judith, and of course all AD to allow this. And it's still 4 minutes to go, so Dennis, don't blame me. And remember that in May, we are going to have the next session. So if you have suggestions, if you have advice, if you have any idea that you think might be worth to take on board, this is the time to do it, in particular because from deep of my heart, Irina, thank you so much, because this opportunity to chat is what we feel is needed in order to keep people not only resilient, but able to realize that we will be in presence sooner or later. But just now, I don't think that Stephanie, that is moving the head, is saying, welcome in France in the next month. I don't think so. As you see, her face is clear. Christina is crossing fingers, and I think throughout the world this is happening. So really, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm not closing down. I'm just saying that the official closure of the presentation is this one. And I want to thank both Margaret and Terry for their wonderful presentation. All the comments that you have seen in the slides were in that direction. And so thank you so much. I think that if you want to stay online, Dennis is allowing me to go further just for people that is interested to keep on. In particular, because in the next month, Stephanie Toubert, head of the Oral Health Edu project, is going to send a survey to the deans and much larger maybe, in order to understand how we have to cope with the new profession, new perspective. What is the database of new profession and what we can really foresee in our future after COVID.